Hi there, welcome to Yoga Physio Zone. I'm Sinead and today we are going to talk about shoulders, the shoulder joint and how to protect it when you are doing yoga. So you might be watching this because you have a shoulder problem and you still want to do your yoga, or because you might have been doing yoga recently and you found, oh, that didn't kind of suit my shoulder or something tweaked or whatever. So hopefully this video will show you why and how to avoid all of that. So let's start by just doing a brief anatomy of your shoulder joint. So your shoulder joint, your glenohumeral joint, is where your arm bone, your humerus, attaches in to your torso, if you like. So it's an extremely mobile joint. You can move it in just about every direction. It's the most mobile joint in our body. And because it is so mobile, it's not quite as stable as other joints. So you never hear of somebody, for example, dislocating their knee, except under very extreme conditions, whereas people do dislocate their shoulders, particularly if they're hypermobile. So yeah, it's a very, very mobile joint. It also is extremely well attached to just about everywhere. Okay, so it's just got muscle attachments going everywhere because it depends on those muscles for holding the arm onto your body and then being able to move it in those different directions. So your shoulder is attached to your neck, it's attached to your collarbone, it's attached to the front of your chest, to the side of your chest, to your rib cage. It's attached to your shoulder blade or your scapula muscle, or sorry, bone. It's attached down to your hip, or should I say your iliac crest on that side. And then it's also attached by fascial attachments, which are, I suppose they're like the cling film covering to your muscles, and it's connected by those fascial attachments to your other arm, to your opposite hip and leg, and to the same hip and leg. So it's kind of very well connected. Okay, so when you are doing yoga, you need to be aware that it doesn't act in isolation. So when you stretch your arm out that way, well, you're also stretching your neck a little bit, you're stretching your rib cage, your thoracic spine is stretching, and it does have an effect on your hips. So yeah, just bear that in mind. So when you are doing yoga, there's probably two main ways in which you use your shoulder. You're going to use them for the range of, so the stretchy ones. So you're going to be stretching your arm out to the side in some poses. You're going to be stretching it overhead in other poses. Over to the side, you're going to be stretching it behind you in certain poses. So it's that range, that flexibility that you'll be using for some of the poses. And then for other poses, you're going to be like downward dog, or some of the poses on all fours, you're actually going to be weight bearing through that shoulder. So we're going to be talking about those two different ways in which you need to negotiate any injuries if you have them when you're doing some of those poses. So we are going to start with the stretchy poses, the ones where you're moving your arm into different positions. Now, what I'd say probably my number one rule really is to try not to, obviously you don't cause any pain, right? So, but stretchy kind of soreness is okay. So it's okay to feel, oh, okay, that's tight, and I can really feel that that's stretching something, maybe in a kind of a stretchy soreness kind of way, but not a painful way. So that's the number one rule. The second thing is, if you can, when you are moving your arm into positions where it's kind of stretched up, if you can, try and not have any discomfort around here, because that's your rotator cuff, right? If you're feeling it there, you're probably feeling compression on your rotator cuff. Now, your rotator cuff are a series of muscles that kind of interlink and kind of cause a kind of a mesh-like structure that kind of surrounds the head of your humerus and those muscles kind of help move the shoulder kind of in and out, but they also quite provide a fair bit of stability. They do get squished when we raise our arm or stretch it to kind of full positions like that, and that squishing is kind of something that happens normally. But if you have a sore rotator cuff, those positions are really going to aggravate it. So when you are actually doing those movements, please don't try not to feel the discomfort there. Try and angle your arm a little bit so that you're actually feeling stretches elsewhere and not discomfort here. The only exception being if you are doing stretches where you are stretching the arm across the body like that, well then it's appropriate to feel some bit of stretchy soreness along there. But otherwise, try not to kind of be aiming your poses to feeling something here. Okay, that's probably my number one rule. So we're going to just talk about a couple of poses just to put that into action. Okay, the first one being child's pose. This is a great pose, and I give this a lot actually for some of my patients who would have tight shoulders, but always with that rule, if you are stretching into child's pose, please don't feel it there. Try and angle your arm so you are feeling it somewhere underneath the kind of the armpit or down into the front of your chest. And always, when you are doing these poses, be mindful of your neck, okay? If you have a shoulder problem, you may well have kind of a hidden, maybe some hidden stiffness in your neck as well. So I'm not trying to make you too vigilant or anything like that, but just be aware your neck needs to be comfortable when you're doing this. So head down like that. And let's say I'm doing that and my arm is uncomfortable in that position. Well, then just bring your arm back. Or bring the arm out to the side. Try and angle it in such a way that you're no longer feeling it here, but you're feeling it somewhere else. And then you are doing child's pose in a really good way for your shoulder. And of course, we all know child's pose can be used as well to stretch out some of the lower back muscles and all of that. But in this case, as I said, you can use this to stretch out your shoulder, and you can, let's say you can only get this far and then you can't get any further because it won't go any further. Well, then you work in that position. You kind of just mooch around, take some deep breaths in that position, and you just don't force it, okay? Or you can move your hand out, as I said, to get lower down into it. You just have to adjust things for you so that the pose works for you. And that's the same in all yoga poses, is you just have to work the poses for you. So let's talk about a pose where you bring your arm overhead. So I'm going to talk about this pose here. What's that called? I don't know. Anyway, but we also do these in kind of in standing poses with the arms kind of going over. So let's say this is my right arm and it's stretching over like that. Now I feel that there, and that's appropriate, that's good. If I was feeling that at the back of my arm, as we've already spoken about, I'm going to just aggravate my arm. So basically just bring it out of that position and just bring it to where it is comfortable for you. Even if you have to rest your hand on your head, nothing wrong with that. And try and angle the stretch so that you're feeling it under there. So that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. I'm breathing in that position. I'm breathing out. You also need to be aware, okay, that your shoulder, as I said, is connected to all these other areas. And there is a thing called the shoulder girdle. So you may have heard of the shoulder girdle. It's actually not one thing. It's kind of an anatomical area. So your shoulder girdle is kind of, let's say, the area just surrounding your shoulder joint here and at the back. And it really involves your shoulder blade muscle and your clavicle or your scapula. And what they do is they provide the kind of stability around your glenohumeral joint. So the shoulder girdle has kind of 4 movements, and it's kind of like this elevation or shrugging and depression, and then protraction, which is me going like that with my shoulders and back. So it's technically not movement of your glenohumeral joint, it's actually your shoulder girdle doing those 4 movements. And be aware that the shoulder girdle and the position of the shoulder girdle can profoundly affect the range of motion that you have in your shoulder. And I'm going to show you something. So, for example, let's say I'm trying to do a pose where I'm lifting my arm that way there. Now, I'm going to pretend that I've kind of postured like this, and this is my posture, okay? So my shoulders are up towards my ears. And then when I try to lift my arm, I actually physically cannot get it any higher than that. Mechanically, it's blocked from going any further by virtue of the fact that my shoulders are up towards my ears. Whereas if I drop them down, I can get it right up to there, okay? So the position of your shoulder girdle, whether you're protracted, and again, I'll keep my shoulders down, but I'm going to protract them. And again, I can actually only bring my arm to there when my shoulders are protracted, whereas when I'm retracted, I can get my arm higher. So in general, when your shoulders are down and away from your ears and not forwards but back, you can get better range of motion. So if you find you are in this position and you can kind of only get to there, ask yourself, have I got my shoulder shrugged up towards my ear? And if I dropped it down, would I be able to get it a little bit higher without discomfort? Just, ask yourself that the next time you're in a pose, okay? The other shoulder pose or the position that isn't that common in yoga, but it does happen, is when the arm is behind you. So Gomukhasana, for example, or cow facing pose. I don't know why it's called that. But anyway, some of these ones, for example, that you might have your arm in that position, and then you're kind of, eventually you'll be doing, let's say, a position like that. Now, there's no point in even attempting that kind of thing until you are sure that your shoulder is comfortable, first of all, to do that. So working on the base pose, first of all, is really important. So a lot of people find when they're in that position that it's not a position that we're in very often. So the front of your shoulder can be quite tight. So it needs to get used to that, maybe for a few weeks of your yoga class before you decide you're going to try putting it into a weight bearing position. So when you're trying a new pose and a new position, just go easy the first time, first couple of times, okay, until you're sure that you can kind of tolerate it before you go further into the pose. Now, I think I have talked about lifting the arm up, arm out to the side, arm behind you. So those are all the range of motion ones. So let's talk about the ones where you're putting weight through your shoulders. And these, I suppose, are the ones that we do in all fours. So lots of kind of, different ones can be done. And those do require putting weight down through your shoulders. And if you haven't done this in a while, well then you might find that your shoulder doesn't really tolerate being able to take weight that much. And you might need to work yourself up gradually to being able to do that, okay? Or if you have a problem with your wrist, like really to do proper kind of shoulder stability, you kind of need a bit of stability in the hands and the wrists. And you might find when you're on all fours in the beginning, you can't straighten your elbows. You have to kind of go down like that in order to give yourself some stability. And you know what? That's okay. And eventually you can work up to having straight arms. If you've watched my other videos, I'm always talking about this, blue in the face from listening to me, I'm sure. But when you are taking weight through your hands, do try and take it on the bases of your fingers like that. And I will do a video shortly with wrists and hands just specific to that. But there is a hand lock, Hasta Bandha, but I won't go into that in too much detail, but just be aware that that's where you need to be taking your weight, okay? And then kind of like kneading yourself into the mat there. And that kind of gives you something to push against. So pushing into the ground like that actually activates. So I'm pushing into the ground really strongly, and that activates my shoulder girdle muscles. Now that we know what a shoulder girdle is, okay? So it really works these muscles nicely, and it protects my actual glenohumeral or shoulder joint. Also in this position, so you might find you have to bend the elbows a little bit. If you can get the elbows straight, we do get people then to roll their arms so that the crease of their elbow is actually facing forwards, because again that activates these muscles of the shoulder girdle and really gives you some bit of strength. But that's something that is worked on over time, okay? And you do need a bit of wrist range of motion to be able to do that. So, you know, some people find that they have to come up on their knuckles like that, and then they can think about rolling their arms in and out. So by rolling the arms in, you're getting your shoulder or your arm creases to face forwards. There you go. And then you can do your different movements like that. Okay? If your shoulder just really can't tolerate taking weight, well then maybe you should consider not doing those poses, or at least being very conservative with building up your tolerance to them. So just be aware of that. It's a different way of working the shoulder, and if you have jointy problems as opposed to muscly ones, that can kind of aggravate them a little bit. So just, you know, don't be too vigilant. Pain will tell you whether it's something that is suitable to you or not. And finally, I'll just show you downward dog. So again, downward dog, one of the most popular poses in yoga, and it does require you to take weight through your hands. So you're going up into downward dog. Now let's see, you know, you might find, well, I just can't really tolerate taking weight through my hands. And bend your knees and see if you can kind of stick your bum in the air, and that usually takes a little bit of weight off the hands. But again, you might have to kind of negotiate, bend your elbows a little bit if you need to. Whatever you need to do, someday you will do the perfect dog. I'm not there yet, as you can see. But you need to kind of make sure that you can kind of take whatever weight your shoulder will tolerate. So if it means you have to get your arm a little bit out to the side, on that side, whatever feels good for you, you might have to move it around a little bit, bend the elbow a little bit, as long as you're not aggravating somewhere else. That's cool. So that is the whistle stop tour of shoulders and how to protect them. So best of luck with that, and we'll talk soon. Bye now.